Tender engines on my railway do as they are told, and if you have to shunt, you're going to shunt. Come on, Henry, it's nearly time for your train.
Henry's not going. None of us are. Either you get a proper shunter, or we're staying here.
Oh, that's so. Wouldn't you see about that?
Then Sir Topham Hatt walked away and got in his car and drove off to the workshop. Soon he arrived at the workshop.
Hello there, I'm Sir Topham Hatt, and I'm deeply in need of a shunter. Could you help me out?
Hello, Sir Topham Hatt. It's nice to meet you, and I think we have just the engine you're looking for.
The two men walked over to a few tank engines. All the engines were excited to see which one he would choose.
These three just came in from the Great Western Railway this week. These engines have the latest features of a good performing shunter.
The Fat Controller smiled and looked at them very carefully, and made sure they were the right choice. But out of the corner of his eye, he saw a small green saddle tank engine with the number 6 on his side.
That's the one! He's perfect for the job! He even has the number 6, just what I needed to. How much?
Ah, yes. Him. Well, are you sure I could not interest you in another engine? He's not that good and did not pass his trials.
That's alright. Sometimes everyone needs a second chance. Will you come and work for me?
Yes, sir.
That's a good engine. Now what's your name?
I was never given a name.
I'll call you Percy.
Thank you, sir.
Percy arrived later that afternoon. He was introduced to a small blue tender engine named Edward.
Percy, this is Edward, and he'll be teaching you to shunt trucks and coaches in the yard for the bigger engines to take.
Nice to meet you, Percy. Are you ready to be a useful engine?
Nice to meet you, Edward. I can't wait to start working here. You're one of the kindest engines I've met so far.
Well, I definitely know you're going to like it here on Soda.
I wonder why. And without a second chance, Percy wished Henry loudly. Bust my buffers! And Henry raced back into the back of the shed, nearly breaking through the buffers.
Haha, you wished him so beautifully. I wish I could wish like that.
You should hear them in the workshop. The louder you wish, the sooner you'll get their attention.
Percy and Edward laughed and went around marshalling and shunting the coaches and trucks.
Oh, what's going on? Who's there?
Come on, don't be silly. Let's get going.
We'll show him silly, all right. Hold back! Hold back!
They kept on shunting the departing trains into their proper sidings until the yard manager walked up.
Edward, the Fat Controller has asked you to double-head a goods train with Percy, the Thomas's branch line. He wants you to show him the way there. Percy hasn't learned the route yet, and he needs to know the right way.
Oh, I see. Well, all right. Then I'll tell him at once.
Edward then puffed over to Percy. He was filling up on coal and water. The yardmaster then walked towards the station where Percy's driver and fireman were waiting.
Hey, Percy, I was thinking, what if you head the train? Then you can see the wonderful sights and sounds of the island that you haven't seen yet.
Really? Nobody's asked me to pull a train with them before.
The two engines set off a little while later with their train for Thomas's branch line.
Edward, have you ever felt like nobody ever likes you?
That's deep, but yes, I have. At some points during my career, the bigger engines never seem to think I'm useful enough, even though they have each done something ridiculous of their own.
What did they do?
Well, I'll tell you. It was raining hard one day and Henry was pulling a passenger train. I saw Henry in the distance and saw him go through the tunnel. I assumed he would come out the other end, but he never did. Then I looked back to see him staying in the tunnel. I got back at Knapford later that day. James told me that when he was dropping off the Fed controller, he was told Henry didn't want to leave the tunnel due to his paint getting ruined by the rain. They decided to block up Henry and leave him there.
But why is that? Engines need water to run, and whenever you get a washdown, they clean you with water too.
Edward agreed and thought Percy was a very smart and clever little engine.
Next we have our big blue express engine, Gordon. Now to the contrary, I believe people think Gordon doesn't actually pull struts. He does, but not often, since he finds struts and sidings undignified and disgraceful, to put in his words. But one day Gordon was told to take a goods train. He did not like that at all. He didn't want to move, so I was tasked with pushing him onto a turntable. He complained about it the whole time, but due to it being a windy day, and that Gordon is a big engine, he upset the balance and rolled right off the track into a ditch.
What about James? Has he ever made a mistake on the island yet?
Indeed he has. This was how Thomas earned his branch line as well. On his first day on the island, James's brake blocks caught fire. He wasn't able to slow down, and because of that, he crashed off the line into a field. Thomas brought the breakdown train to James's rescue, so he could be lifted back onto the rails and taken back to the safety of the sheds.
Wow, Sodor has a lot of stories to tell, doesn't it?
I agree. I've even had my own mishaps on the island too.
No disrespect when I say this, Edward, but could you possibly tell me what happened? Did you stay in a tunnel like Henry? Did you fall into a ditch like Gordon? Did your brake blocks also catch on fire like James's did?
To answer your question, Percy, no, I didn't hide in a tunnel. Second, it never happened to me, or else I would most likely smell like dishwater or something. I'm however grateful my brake bots didn't catch fire, but my story is different. Well, quite different actually. I used to never be taken out for work and was usually left behind because all the engines like Gordon and Henry were much bigger than me, which meant they could pull much heavier trains and go faster than I could. They would tease me and say things like, "The driver won't choose you again," or "He wants stronger, more powerful engines like us."
How rude.
Well, they then realized how useful I am, and now I do work often, especially since they've gone on strike.
The two engines soon arrived on Thomas's branch line. Percy looked over to see the yards, but then Percy saw two coaches and a tank engine coming down the line. This engine had 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome.
Hello there, I'm Thomas. Are you the new engine who's here to get those lazy tender engines out of the shed finally?
Percy laughed and smiled.
I'm Percy, and yes, I'm staying here. Edward was telling me stories of the bigger engines.
Well, be careful of them. They're quite troublesome engines. Once Gordon pulled me along with the Express after teasing, which I do know was immature, but I think he took it too far, honestly.
Indeed. Do be careful, Percy. Those engines don't know right from wrong sometimes, and do some of the silliest things.
Well, I better get back to taking passengers. Come on, girls.
I'm ready, Thomas. Goodbye, Percy. It was nice meeting you. Indeed. Nice meeting you, Percy. Have a nice day.
Thomas blew his whistle and set off back down the road. Percy and Edward then played with some trucks. After a great deal of shunting, Percy went off back down the main line when nobody was looking. Edward looked down the line to see Percy heading down the express line. He was shocked, but he couldn't catch up to Percy, since his driver was in the station talking with the station master.
Oh no. Gordon's going to be coming down that line with the express. I hope Percy remembers what I told him when you get to a signal box.
Percy stopped at a signal box and waited for the signalman to set the point so he could get back to the yard. Percy forgot all about whistling to the signalman that he was there, so the signalman forgot him. Percy waited patiently for the points to change, but before he had another second to think, there came Gordon with the express. Percy shut his eyes to what was to come. He then opened them to see Gordon a few inches away from his buffers.
I won't stay here. I'll run away.
Percy was so scared, he ran right through Edward's station and kept on going right over Gordon's hill.
I have to stop. I have to stop.
But Percy couldn't stop. He had no driver, so he just kept on going down the main line. A signalman saw Percy was in trouble and diverted him onto a siding ending in a bank of earth.
I gotta stop. I gotta stop. Wait a minute. I have stopped.
He sighed thankfully. All of a sudden, Gordon arrived.
Well done, little Percy.
For what, may I ask? I was cheeky and nearly crashed you and your coaches,
said Percy.
You started so quickly that you stopped a terrible accident. Luckily now you're safe, and you were also smart enough to stop too.
Thank you, Gordon. I'm very grateful.
And I'm grateful that you started so quickly,
laughed Gordon. The two engines then went back home buffer to buffer. Percy is sometimes still cheeky to Gordon, but now the two engines are good friends and always there to give one another a helping buffer. One late winter's night, Percy's crew came back. Wake up, Percy. We needed to help Thomas at the harbour. He needs help organising a special train for Henry. Though we do need to be careful, the tracks are a bit icy.
Alright, I guess if it means I can go back to sleep afterward,
responded Percy sleepily. They got to the harbour in just a few minutes. Thomas was already there waiting for Percy.
I'm so thankful you're here to help. I would never be able to do all this shunting on my own in the time we have.
What are we waiting for? Let's get to it. What is this train anyway?
It's a special train Henry takes that arrives here and it goes all around the island. I forgot what it's really called, but...
Thomas was interrupted as Henry puffed up alongside the two tank engines. It's called the Flying Kipper. I deliver it to restaurants and station cafes along the way. Then the rest of the train is then left at Vickerstown for another engine to take.
Please be careful, Henry. I was informed the tracks are icy, and the snow will be coming down harder later tonight.
Don't worry, I've pulled this train plenty of times, and never once had an accident. Ice and snow aren't gonna stop me. Percy was right. The snow did come down harder. Thankfully, Henry had plenty of sand in his sandboxes at the time, so he was still able to go down the line just as fine. Henry stopped at many stations along the main line. Come on, don't be silly, don't be silly. Henry was heading to the other side of the island to make his final stops. The journey was going well. Then a yellow signal appeared ahead. The driver got out and looked at the signal, but the home signal was down, meaning they could go on through.
All clear, old boy. Away we go.
They didn't know the points had been frozen due to the cold weather, but snow had forced the home signal down. James was waiting on the other line of the freight train to let Henry pass through. James's crew were waiting in the brake van with the guard.
Henry should have passed by now. I wonder where he could be.
James's crew had gotten out just in time while heading back to James. When they heard an engine approaching, James did too.
Here comes Henry. Right on time. Hopefully then I can finally deliver my train. What was that?
I'm not sure. Let me go check. James's driver ran back and uncoupled James from his train and went to the nearest signal box. James didn't know what was going on.
What's going on? Is Henry alright?
Henry's had an accident. He's crashed into the back of our train and has come off the rails. We need to get the train quickly. James puffed back to the yards to get the breakdown train. He thought of all the times he and Gordon had been rude to poor Henry. He felt awful and questioned why he'd been so mean to the poor engine. James got the breakdown train and puffed quickly back to the crash site. He looked at Henry while the Fat Controller talked to him. James didn't know what to think, or if Henry would be okay.
Cheer up, Henry. It was nobody's fault. Ice and snow caused the accident. I'm sending you the crew. A wonderful plate for sick engines. They'll give you a new shape and a larger firebox, too. And you won't need Welsh coal anymore. Won't that be nice?
I hope so. But I doubt it.